a Kurgi called Somaya. And Mr. Somaya read the book and he came to the conclusion that there were blasphemous references, that at a time when the Muslim community in India was under strain, it was not good to add to further fuel to the fire. And therefore he took a decision which was an objective discussion based on requirements of law and order to say, no import for the present. More or less that was the decision. Now, this talk that it was banned by the Prime Minister or the politics is nonsense, because when it was banned, that evening Doordarshan referred to it. The Prime Minister called me and asked me, what is all this about banning the book? And I said, I'd check with the Home Secretary and get back. And next morning I told him it was the Home Secretary's decision. And being a highly respected civil servant, the PM did not question it. Now, we intended to keep that decision secret because we didn't want to further inflame tensions, nor did we wish to get into controversy. And if things quietened down, it left the door open for us to permit its import. Now, Salman somehow or the other found out we had banned it. He sent a very nasty letter to the faxed message to the Prime Minister, which came down to me. And I did not intend to enter into a further controversy, so I just said, we just filed it in the Prime Minister's office, not responding to it. Finding us not responding, Salman decided he needed a bit of publicity, and I'm being brutally frank about this. He calls a press conference in London to which the BBC is invited and lampoons India for lacking freedom, for the Prime Minister being a censor, without bothering to check with us why it was done or what it was done. And the BBC plays it on its Persian language services, which are listened apparently very avidly to by the Ayatollahs in Qum. So when the Iranians learned that the Indians had banned a book, Blasphemous of Islam, they said, we are the Islamic Republic, and they went one step further. But the reality is, I think it was a bit of Salman's own recklessness. If he had come back to us, we could have discussed it. But going public to lampoon India as a secular democratic country banning the book really was what led ultimately to whatever happening. I've never spoken about this. I'm not given to speaking of what I do. I happen to mention it because Tavleen and I were involved in this whole episode. But I thought I could share it with an audience in Mumbai because you would understand. Thank you.
Right, so now we'll take some questions from the audience. If you could just indicate. I think
Declan Walsh, you were asked to leave Pakistan in 72 hours. Can you tell us a bit of the kind of writing and features that may have triggered this?
I don't know the answer to that. We've been asking the New York Times has been asking the Pakistani government to specify the reasons for the expulsion for the last 6 months. On the letter that they wrote, and this has come out in public before, the letter that they wrote to me, they said that it was because of undesirable activities. Now, what they are, we don't know. Hopefully it was for my writing and not for something else. That's all.
Do you have a busy social life in Pakistan, Declan?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Yeah. I don't know.
Yes, the gentleman in front.
I was happy to know that Atish is related to Faiz Ahmad Faiz, and he has translated Mantu, both icons in the Indian literary circles. I only wanted to say that both of them were not born Pakistanis. They were born Indians, as I was, though I was born in Karachi before partition. One thing which I find missing in most of literary discussion is that my language, there are Sindhis, crores in India and Pakistan, is generally not covered in many literary events like Kalagoda and all this. Once I had mentioned to Javed Akhtar at a literary meeting that don't you think the two bonds apart from Bollywood between India and Pakistan will be Urdu and Sindhi. Because we have Sindhi writers in India whose books nobody buys and the readers are in Pakistan. That's why some of the Sindhi books are republished in Pakistan. Whenever Pakistan young generation poets and writers come to India, हम उनको आँखों पर बिठाते हैं. अब और जब हमें चांस मिलती है, वीज़ा मिलती है वहाँ जाने की, तो वो हमें आँखों पर बिठाते हैं. I wanted to ask you one question. What is the general writing in Pakistan of post-partition writers? And one person whom we consider almost an avatar, Shah Abdul Latif Bhatai, is he known in Pakistan outside Sindhi world? Thank you.
So, on your first point, I can't, I mean, you have a lost language as far as I can say. Everywhere I go, I have someone from Sindh holding my hand, weeping about what's happened with Sindhi. And actually, I don't know if you've been to Pakistan, but the spectacle of a dismembered society, it was more evident to me in Sindh than anywhere, where you had literally whole sections of Hyderabad, Sindh, where the Hindu area was still absolutely like it was a kind of, there was a sort of desolation about it. You still had all the Hindu names, you had all and the Muhajir was holed up in a fort on top. So you had this kind of like a society that 60 years on was still broken, that hadn't, unlike Punjab, it hadn't recovered any kind of wholeness. So that is one of the things that's probably one of the rawest wounds of partition, the way that Sindh came apart like that. On your second point, on your question about literature, I think that Pakistan has suffered an identical fate to the fate that happened in India, where at some point, because of a kind of convent education, a kind of somewhere within the middle class, an entire population was transferred to English, not to very good English, let me add. And it never recovered. The people who had supported Manto and Fez, that very promising middle class of the 30s that read in their own languages, that was very fluent in English at the same time, where there was a really deep bilinguality, that has crumbled, like, in my opinion, it has here too. So the state of the languages is a little bit better in Pakistan, where as far as Urdu is concerned, but in my experience, the energy is still though moving towards English.
If I can just add very briefly, one of the recent developments in Pakistani media has actually been the renewed expression of vernacular languages through local television stations. You know, there's been this TV explosion in Pakistan, much as there has been here. And in recent years, what we've seen is an increasing number of smaller stations, Sindhi stations, Punjabi stations, city-based stations, and obviously the biggest language obviously is Urdu. There were a couple of attempts to launch English language TV stations some years back, and they failed dismally. All of them closed. So actually, while I think, as Atish says, the written expression of the vernacular languages is very poor, and I hear a lot of similar laments, in fact, about Urdu as well. Urdu literature gets relatively little attention, particularly compared to minority English language literature. In the spoken language, it has had something of, if not a revival, then it's got greater space for expression.
Yeah. This question of Urdu and Sindhi, Shah Abdul Latif Bhatai, I think, does not exist beyond the province of Sindh. I think languages also evolve. If you ask someone, sir, of your age or my age, to listen to All India Radio's pure Hindi today, you may find it difficult. Because what has happened after partition is that while the beautiful language we knew it as Hindustani, which was what Nehru described, at the time of partition became, which was the spoken lingua franca all across, in India became more Sanskritized. In Pakistan, it became more Arabized. I mean, you have to sit at Amritsar and watch Lahore TV, or sit at Lahore and watch Amritsar TV, which is Punjabi. Quite a bit of difference. Punjabi has been Hindiized. Punjabi on the other side has been Arab Persianized. These are the realities. But having said that, I go back to a basic point. You referred to Urdu poets. As I said earlier on, I think there was no greater joy in seeing the Urdu poets together. But sadly in Pakistan, and let me put it this way, this sort of secular ideal, transcending borders and transcending religions, was a characteristic of the Indian left in what was undivided India. Therefore, you could get a Faiz, a Manto, a Kaifi Azmi, a Habib Jalib, or an Ali Sardar Jafri, coming with a narrative and poetry which transcends religion and national boundaries. I'm afraid, sadly, in both India and in Pakistan, that is a variety which you will find far, far less in succeeding generations.
Yeah, I am Muhammad Wajiuddin, journalist with the Times of India. Last week, I was part of a group of journalists which visited Pakistan, and we were in one of the universities at Lahore. And while talking to the young students, after we spoke to them, one of the boys came to me and he took me aside and told me, "Sir, मैं आपसे कुछ बात करना चाहता हूँ." I said, "Yeah, tell me." उसने कहा कि मुझे यकीन नहीं आ रहा है कि आप हिंदुस्तान से आए हो, हिंदुस्तानी मुसलमान हो, इतनी अच्छी उर्दू बोलते हो और इकबाल, फैज़, फ़राक और फ़राज को आप कोट करते हो. Then I told him, ये बहुत ही गलत है कि perhaps you have not been told about the real India. Now the question here is, both to Atish and Mr. Prasarthi, is that perhaps there's a lot of misconception and rejection also because we have not told them, or these young students have not been exposed to real India. Likewise, India has not been exposed to real Pakistan. The one point that I'd like to mention here is that why only there is a cap on just 2 journalists, Indian journalists, to be stationed in Islamabad and only 2 Pakistani journalists stationed in New Delhi. There have to be more journalists so that they can't have the newspapers in print. They can go online. They can't watch news channels. And sorry to say that Bollywood is not the real representation of India. There's a lot beyond Bollywood. So unless and until we relax these restrictions, we can't have a peaceful Pakistan or peaceful India, and there will be always be a misconception about India over there. Thank you.
On this business of journalism, I think it is done on the basis of reciprocity. Our position has always been, we are quite willing to increase our journalists in Pakistan. But I don't necessarily agree with this policy of reciprocity. But we will give you as many visas as you want for your guys here, provided our journalists get an equal number of visas. Now, I have argued against this, but I found that the Indian media is very powerful. They say, why should you allow them in if they're not allowing us in? Left to myself, honestly, I tell you, I think as an open society, we should be much more relaxed about visas. This was happening till 26/11 occurred. And, we have friends here who will tell you it's become a problem. Because in the case of 26/11, in good faith, we gave visas to people from Pakistan by our consulate in Chicago, and you know what the price was. So I still don't believe that should be the case. Yes, I would hope, you're right, more than journalists, I think ordinary people who come for pilgrimages to our shrines, I think we should both open out on tourist visas. And the more that people who travel, the better. But till a couple of years ago, and before 2611 broke, we were moving in that direction. When you could get people who wanted contacts to prevail over ministries and organizations dealing with security. After 2611, we have hardened up. I think it's overdone. I think we need to ease up. But I've been long enough in government to realize that once the guy who says no prevails, it takes a long time to get government to move in another direction. So I entirely agree with you. More journalists, more people, more visitors. In fact, I do believe that we serve our interests by giving much larger number of people in Pakistan to visit the Dargah at Ajmer Sharif. Let them come and see, whether you're Hindu or Muslim or Christian, you go to that Dargah as a place of worship.
One last question. We've got several hands raised, but we've got... Oh, sorry, Declan, did you want to say
one thing? I think it would probably be remiss of us not to mention that on this very session, two Pakistani writers, not journalists, Nadeem Aslam and Mohammed Hanif, were due to be present here, but were unable to obtain visas to come. So I think that's also...
Absolutely. Right, several hands, one question to go now. So, please.
My question is addressed to Mr. Parthasarathy. Sir, we talked about the increasing escalation in the armaments in Pakistan, civilian society, and obviously decade after decade we've seen the quality of life going down there. If the trend continues, it's not very difficult to sort of believe that the Western powers will have to come and curtail the escalating situation there and take control. My question is derived from this experience and coming back to India. You also talked about 1987 riots in Meerut and Malayana. I happened to be there at that point of time before I moved to Mumbai in '88. My question is that if Pakistan going forward sees control by the Westerners to contain escalation of armament, do you expect that the same reaction between the two communities could become worse going forward in India? I saw that in Meerut when I went there last month. The situation between 1987 and now has worsened. And do you see what is happening in one northern state in India could actually spill over to more states, and India becomes a so much worse place to live as far as the harmony between two communities is concerned?
Look, I think you're talking of Jammu and Kashmir.
Yes. Yes.
No, I think by and large, Jammu and Kashmir is settling down. And by and large, people look at that issue more in political than communal terms. For example, we delayed holding elections in Jammu and Kashmir for years. At long last, you've brought it down to grassroots level. So whatever violence is there is not being executed by locals. They are infiltrators from across the line of control.